If anybody would really want to flatter me, they would say you remind me of your mother-in-law. That would be the best compliment I could ever get, because she's everything that life should be.
I really feel like there's incredible takeaway from everybody that you meet in your life.
My parents, my husband, my son. I mean, I've said this already. They inspire me to be the best that I can be.
Who inspires me are those people that have the courage of their conviction and succeed.
My parents had an unusual story in that they were actually married before World War II in 1931, and they had 2 children at a normal time in their lives when they were in their mid to late 20s. Unfortunately, those children were killed in Auschwitz in 1944. So I was, in effect, really a miracle baby, because after the war, when they reunited, their initial instinct, as one could understand, after suffering what they suffered, they didn't want to have children. In fact, I was born after World War II in a displaced persons camp in Austria. They never forgot what happened to them, but they didn't dwell on it. And they had a tremendous sense of joy of life and optimism. I always say that's the greatest legacy. If you can sustain that kind of optimism after what they've been through, then our normal, trials and tribulations really pale in comparison. They really are part of me and I think so every day.
So no one really knows what their legacy is. All you can do is just be in the here now and do the right thing.
I want my children to remember me as someone who was fair, was honest, and who wanted to try to make things better. I don't know if we always can, but I want them to at least think that I cared enough about other people to try.
When I see a need in our community, I see a need for the future, I look at it as a battle that we're all in together, and I want my legacy to be that I have other people to help in that fight.
When you do a kind act or a deed for someone, who knows how that goes through society and through time, and how an act of loving kindness can result in a beautiful thing 100 years from now. You just never know.
Wherever you choose to put that time, it will be worth it, because you will have made this world a better place. And I think that's what I would like to leave. I feel that it's important that if you love something when you're alive, and if it's important to you, you need to make sure that you take care of it when you're gone. Just sit down and take some time for yourself. Like, what's important to you? Who are you? Because it will really inform how you spend your days now. If you think about how you want to be remembered, whatever it is that makes you you, like, invest in that. Double down.
Thank you. First time I've seen that. That whole project was an amazing experience for all of us. And I think that when you see it come together, you realize, wow, this really is what we're talking about. It's what we're talking about here today. Legacy is the specific topic that we're talking about today. My name is Paula Shaman, and I'm the chair of the Federation's Create a Jewish Legacy program. And I'm also a member of the Federation's Endowment Foundation Committee.
And I'm so happy to see all of you here today, and many of you who've been here for all 3 sessions of this conversation project. And I'm sure you're going to have a wonderful experience today. I'd also like to just take a minute to welcome some other people that have been very instrumental in this project and in today's event. I'd like to welcome the president of Federation, Jane Petak, in the back of the room. And next to her, Zvi Marins. We're so happy to see you today. Zvi is the chair of the Foundation and the immediate past president of Federation. Good to see you, Zvi. 2 weeks ago, Joan Krieger welcomed you with information about Federation's work and mission. And last week, Roberta Abrams talked about the Federation's Endowment Foundation. I invite you to read more about annual programs and legacy giving in the Community Resource Guide and the Create a Jewish Legacy brochures that are on your tables. Take one home, peruse it. You're welcome to call any of us for any questions that you may have. Today, I'd like to take 2 minutes to share information about Federation's Volunteer Center. Many of you already volunteer. Other of you may hear about something new, some new opportunities that you can get involved in to make a difference. Jewish Federation's Volunteer Center's goal is to match willing volunteers with meaningful volunteer experiences. Use us as a central resource to get involved and make a difference in this northern New Jersey community. We can connect you with weekly, monthly, or if you don't have that much time, with occasional opportunities. We'll make it work for you. In addition to ongoing opportunities, here are a few of the Volunteer Center programs, which you may or may not have heard of previously. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about Mitzvah Day. Mitzvah Day occurs annually, a Sunday in November, and it's a great way to get your entire family involved, kids, grandkids. You can volunteer at a park, a senior center, take up a collection or more. Good Deeds Day is another one of Federation's opportunities. It's part of a national effort each year. It helps us to fill the area food pantries. And this year, Good Deeds Day will be on April 10th. So put that on your calendar and look out for that. Bergen Reads is another amazing opportunity which helps improve literacy of our local public school students by being a reading buddy each week throughout the school year. I've spoken to many people who've been involved in this project and that they find it very, very rewarding. Cleanup Crew is another program, something I've been involved with over the years. Cleanup Crew began after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. It began as a way to participate in cleanup efforts after natural disasters. It started by 2 guys, one of whom had worked in New Orleans, one went to school in New Orleans, and the project is now on, I'm not sure, maybe the 10th or 15th trip. And it started in New Orleans, but then locally it's also had a number of projects after Sandy locally. I went there about 6 or 7 years ago. Jody Heimler was with us. I took my son there and my husband, and it was an incredibly fulfilling experience. So that's something also that you might want to look into. And then, of course, one of our biggest volunteer events of the year will take place on Sunday, January 31st, and that's Super Sunday. And we hope that we'll see many of you here to help make calls on behalf of Federation. The Volunteer Center is part of Federation's overall mission of helping people in need and building the Jewish community. We welcome your participation. And there are postcards on your tables. Feel free to take this home. Contact Beth Figman, her number is right here. And if you're interested in getting more involved. Because Federation transforms lives, including your own lives. And I'll tell you the dirty little secret that I always tell my friends. I found that volunteering, the real secret of it, the reason I do it, it feels good. So let Federation help you feel good by volunteering. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you again and more often after that.
Took my notes.
Sorry. I thought she could do it by herself.
Okay, so my job is to introduce our two speakers today, and that's what I'm going to do. So Rabbi Deborah Ornstein brings the meaning and relevance of the Jewish tradition to audiences across North America as a guest speaker and scholar in residence. For 20 years, she was first I was going to read this, and then I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't read it, and that's what my hesitation is, Deborah, is that, I just want to hear you. For 20 years, she was an instructor at the American Jewish University in Los Angeles, where she taught in the Rabbinical Graduate School, undergraduate conversion, elder hostel, and continuing ed programs. She was a senior fellow of the Wilstein Institute of Jewish Policy Studies and a spiritual leader of Makom or Shalom Synagogue. In 2010, she returned to her home state of New Jersey and became spiritual leader of Congregation B'nai Israel in Emerson. And she continues her writing and her public speaking, and her passion is connecting Judaism and spirituality to everyday lives and ultimate concerns. And the focus of her social action is ending slavery in our lifetimes. Rabbi Ornstein is the author or editor of 5 books. I'm going to shorten it. Okay, she attended Princeton University, the University of Judaism. She got her ordination and her MA from Jewish Theological Seminary. Oh my God. She is the winner of many awards. She is a 7th generation rabbi in her family, an alumna of the first entering class of JTS that actually included women. We were there at the same time and we didn't know each other. Yeah. Deborah has been blessed to become a wife and mother. Her husband Craig is here, and she has 2 children, Emmett and Hannah Matilda. So that's Deborah, and wait, hold on, because I have to introduce Carol now so it can be a smooth transition. Okay, Carol's also a remarkable woman, but I don't want to tell her story. She is the founder and CEO of CareBinders. She is the creator of CB Data and CB Data Pro software suite. She has worked in the business world for over 30 years in various management capacities. She has a BS and an MS in special ed and education from the University of Michigan. She has a son, Aaron, who recently became engaged. Yay. And I don't want to tell you too much about Carol, because if I do, then I tell her story, whereas I want her to tell you her story. Len and I met Carol a couple of years ago. She's been recently featured in our donor advisor newsletter. Carol is a real doer. She had a personal experience which led to a career trajectory, and she'll tell her story about it. So ladies, Deborah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Whatever you'd like.
Well, thank you for such a gracious introduction. I really need to thank the amazing Lori Siegel for organizing and putting this together, and thank you to all my friends at Federation for all you do every day.
Can everybody hear?
I have been looking forward to today. I love the readings that we're going to share. I love the exercises. I love the topic. And at the same time, I'm aware that we have all signed up for a difficult conversation today. This is the third session in a series. The last session was Leading a Life of Impact and Meaning. Who wouldn't want to sign up for that? The first session was on growing older. That's our reality. Every one of us is growing older. As they say, it's better than the alternative. Today touches on the alternative. Today we face the reality, that's the number one on your handout, of death. Because when we think about legacy, we have to think about the limitations of life, and in some measure we confront denial and fear around death. And in our society, that is rampant. The great Rabbi Harold Kushner said, "The dying have taught me one great lesson that I never would have learned without their help. Most people are not afraid of dying. Most people are afraid of not having lived." And that's really what we're talking about today. Not so much the inevitability of death, but the possibility that we could go through life without consciously leaving a legacy. So the essential questions of this afternoon are, what's the purpose of your life? Do you believe that there's a common, universal human purpose? Can you articulate for yourself what is your Jewish purpose? Do you have a personal mission, a meaning, a legacy that you want to communicate? Now, those are not questions that get answered in an afternoon, but I hope that we will have some discussions and look at some readings that will give us excellent food for thought about these questions, and perhaps even move you to write an ethical will. Now, most of us in this room are what I call BCE PCE. It's before the common era of personal computers everywhere. That's our generation. And therefore, we are all of an age where we've lost people. Each of us has probably been to several funerals, at least. And of course, funerals are sad, obviously. But in many cases, funerals are also quite uplifting, because rabbis and relatives summarize a life. They talk about the purpose, the mission, what that person valued most, what their gift was to the world, what everyone wants to remember about them and to practice because they were here on this earth. And that is truly uplifting. My main message for you as we start is to say, don't wait for the funeral. Don't wait for someone else to state your legacy. Discern it and share it now while you're alive and while you have strength. Now, Carol, Calvin, and I both had a hand in writing the titles for today. But the truth is, there is an artificiality to saying I'm covering the spiritual and she's covering the practical. The spiritual and the practical go together, at least as long as body and soul go together. The most esoteric spiritual issue or wish has a practical expression. Otherwise, it has no life. And every practicality has a spiritual valence. And that's why on your handouts, I have listed values are reflected in all wills, living wills, ethical wills, and last wills and testaments. You may have noticed me fiddling with this bracelet. I don't wear it every day. It was given to me by my grandmother, Matilda, after whom my daughter is named. And I make a point of wearing it whenever I think she would enjoy the event. I wear it to all family simchas. I wore it today because I was talking about legacy. And so when you think about a last will and testament where you dispose of mere possessions, there's a story behind those possessions. There's a feeling state behind them. If you've ever cleared out a parent's house, you know what I'm talking about. Just touching someone's things, inheriting those things, speaking about the meaning behind those things, is a spiritual legacy. And when you take the practical steps to let your wishes be known, you're leaving another kind of spiritual legacy. You're eliminating stress and arguments by making your wishes clear. You're cultivating shalom bayit, so that there'll be peace in your extended household. Of course, there's also a spiritual legacy communicated by bequests and charitable trusts, not just for the organizations that you benefit, but for any children and grandchildren who see that tzedakah is something alive in you, even at the time of your passing. This connection between the physical and the spiritual is so vivid for me in one document. You can turn to it now, but you don't have to. It's the last page of the photocopied documents from Rabbi Cook, Rav Cook. And the very last page, it's in letter that he wrote in 1919 at the age of 54, 16 years before he was dying. He had a sudden illness, and he thought that might have been the end of his life. As it turned out, thank God, he had many more years left. But what he was primarily concerned with in this hastily written ethical will was, please make sure that all the books I have borrowed get back to their rightful owners. Now, you think about that. Is that the main thing you want to say in your ethical will? Maybe not. But at that moment, what an example of scrupulous honesty. What an example of what his priorities were, what he even had to worry about returning. It wasn't the Tupperware, it was the holy books. He taught his kids something, and all of us something, about Hashivat HaVetim, returning lost objects as a holy mitzvah. If you think about living will, it's not just a medical document, it's also an ethical document. It's a document that seeks to articulate what you believe about end-of-life issues, how you're going to express ubacharta b'chaim, choosing life, when the choices become difficult. I refer on the handout to a link to the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards, because there they have, at least the conservative movement's opinions on Jewish law regarding various end-of-life choices. And what's interesting, because it's the Jews, there are often multiple choice options. You can say, I agree with this, I agree with that. I'm going to choose this option within the range of kosher Jewish options. Now, I have two parents who are very unalike in this way. My mother said, I don't want any fuss. She has do not necessitate orders already in certain cases in place. She established in her living will that she doesn't want extraordinary measures. And my father said, I want you to spend down the family fortune. Keep me alive, do everything. And something like my dad wanted less. And he did, in fact, do everything. At a point when many people don't put in a feeding tube, he put in a feeding tube. At a point when many people don't put in a breathing machine, he put in a breathing machine. And he lived a long and good life with true quality of life, although he could only move his eyes at the end. He had true quality of life to the very end, and it was an amazing legacy. So which way you vote is not really the concern, but that you make your wishes known and that you explain what within your value system caused you to choose that is very, very important. Another thing to think about is if the time comes, let's say, to disconnect you from life support, that's not just a medical decision. What do you want in the room at that moment? What prayers do you want to say? Who should be there? What music do you want playing? I included here a link also and a reference to the Vidui, the confessional prayer that Jews say before dying. Sometimes when I talk about the Vidui, Jews are surprised. We have last rites? I thought that was just the Catholic. But Jews have prayers to say at the end. It's something to think about. And if nothing else, to say just the very end of the Vidui, a prayer we all know by heart. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. What a beautiful way to say goodbye to this world. Many times I'm asked to speak about changes in modern Jewish law and ritual. I wrote a book on women's perspectives on life cycle ritual. And I think people usually expect me when I talk about changes in Life Cycle to talk primarily about women's issues. But the biggest change we have had in the last 100 years on Life Cycle is the change in the laws and behavior around organ donation. Organ donation used to be disallowed by the conservative and orthodox movements. Now, every conservative and orthodox rabbi would tell you that it is halakhically required. It's been a complete turnaround. And the reason is that it used to be that organ donation was exploratory, it was experimental. Now when people donate organs, we are truly saving sight, saving life, extending life. And for this it is permitted to use the body. I've given you some suggested language about organ donation, and I really urge you to think about organ donation. If you haven't made that decision yet, that's a great part of a legacy that you can leave. Share with you a short poem about this that I found inspiring. The day will come when my body will lie upon a white sheet, neatly tucked under four corners of a mattress, located in a hospital busily occupied with the living and the dying. At a certain moment, a doctor will determine that my brain has ceased to function and that for all intents and purposes, my life has stopped. If that happens, do not attempt to instill artificial life into my body by the use of a machine. And don't call this my deathbed. Let it be called the bed of life. And let my body be taken from it to help others lead fuller lives. Give my sight to the man who has never seen a sunrise, a baby's face, or love in the eyes of a woman. Give my heart to a person whose own heart has caused nothing but endless days of pain. Give my blood to a teenager who is pulled from the wreckage of his car so that he might live to see his grandchildren play. Give my kidneys to one who depends on a machine to exist from week to week. Take my bones, every muscle, every fiber, and every nerve in my body, and find a way to make someone walk. Explore every corner of my brain. Take my cells if necessary and let them grow, so that someday a speechless boy will shout at the crack of a bat, and a deaf girl will hear the sound of rain against her window. Now I want to look at some of what others have transmitted, because that is always inspiring. And I'm going to ask us to do a little chavruta, a little sharing in pairs. If you're an odd number at a table, sharing in threes is fine. If you look at your handouts, the first text I want to call to your attention is on page 3. I just mentioned that Jacob was the first one to write an ethical will. When, toward the end of his life in Genesis, he assembles all his children and speaks to them and offers both rebukes and advice and also commends them for the good that they have done. The text that I want to use today is from two different sources in the Babylonian Talmud. The first part from Ketubot, the second part from Pesachim, and it immediately follows on page 3. I'm going to ask you just to look at the bolded parts of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. And if you have time and you're done early, you can look at the small print, that's fine too. But I want to begin just by looking at Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi and to ask you to read it and just see what you notice, see what you are aware of in the way of what he is putting out, what's his process, what are his values, what are his priorities. And for the second reading from Talmud Pesachim 112b, which stands as its own paragraph, look at his specifics, but also see if you can generalize. What do these things stand for beyond themselves? He gives 4 instructions, and they're very specific, but do they also stand for a category, perhaps? So I'm going to give us all about 5 minutes to share with one another just on those 4 paragraphs, those 4 short paragraphs from Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. And let's see how we get inspired in what we learn. Find somebody you know or somebody you don't know.
Read these for, I guess, the whole paragraphs. Well, I guess what she's, what is it teaching? I guess ethical.
Hey, listen, let me give you a chance.
No, I face Marty.
Let me hear some responses. What did you notice? What did you see? What was important or interesting to you? Yes.
I think the most important thing in the first paragraph is the teaching to your children, to your sons. I think is passing things on to your children. I mean, that's out of the Haggadah too. I mean, we learned that we're supposed to instruct our children, and that's sort of implicit through the whole exercise.
Yes. I love that he begins with the rabbis and he says, I need to speak to my children, and then he says to his children, I need to speak to the rabbis. Because there's a way of saying, kids first, that I have to communicate this to my family above all, and I also have a responsibility to the larger community that I want to talk about, both of them. But starting, I love that you underline that, starting with your own kids. Any other, yes, Ellen?
In that first paragraph as well, practically things are going to seem the same. The light is going to be there, the table's going to be there, the bed's going to be there, but everything is still at the same time going to be very different. And to keep that in mind, even though they're the same status quo.
Thank you. It's really saying, I think that, yes, everything will stay the same in a certain sense. His light will continue to burn even after he dies, but of course things will be different as well. Yes?
Yeah, my husband passed away in April, and he had written an ethical will. He started writing it in 2000, and completed it in 2009. I have to say that it was the most beautiful and meaningful gift that he gave to my children and myself.
Thank you for sharing that. And I hope that people will use this inspiration of your husband and of ancient documents and modern documents to move ahead and to begin to write their own ethical wills if they choose. At least to think about what you would write is a very worthwhile and important exercise, even if you don't end up writing a complete document in the way that your husband did. Now, I want to move on to the second of the readings, 4 things he told his sons. What did you notice about that? Did people get there? Raise your hand if you got there. Okay. So if they stand as categories, I mean, the most obvious category to me is the last category, seichel, common sense. Don't stand in front of an ox when it goes through the meadow. Hello. Show a little common sense as a broad category. What else did you notice about categories or any of those 4 specifics that he shared?
I like the first one.
Yes, say more about that.
Mockery is acceptable.
Do not live in a place where mockery is acceptable. Just think about our culture for a moment.
About our election.
It's a big indictment, isn't it? Where sarcasm, mockery, even by presidential candidates, is acceptable. Yeah, so there's in a sense you could say it's social intelligence, it's Jewish intelligence, it's meeting your social obligations and your social contract, financial intelligence, and then it's common sense. Any other thoughts? Yes, honey.
I have a question. Such an ethical will, whatever you write down, wouldn't this be another obligation or object for the children to have to worry how to settle our request, another guilt trip?
That's a very good question. So I want to show you the next ethical will is the answer to Hannah's question. The question is it a guilt trip? Are we putting a burden on our children? Did you have a comment?
I have a comment on the last paragraph.
Yes.
Rabbi Judah Ibn Tibon. The last sentence. These 12 years I have denied myself the usual pleasures and relations of men for your sake, and I still toil for your inheritance. I think that's terrible.
Well, that's where I was going. Yes, that's where I was going. I included Judah Ibn Tibbon for this reason, that whatever you write will be better than what Judah Ibn Tibbon wrote. If you're worried about guilt, if you're worried about guilt, rather, if you're worried about guilt, Judah Ibn Tibbon. Now, the truth is he has one beautiful paragraph, I bolded it, and it's a paragraph that we often see at libraries and on book plates. My son, make books your companions, let your cases and shelves be your pleasure grounds and gardens. It's a beautiful instruction, and we often quote that. What we don't quote is, well, you're still young and there's time for you to improve, which is something else that he says in his, it's full of guilt. And I honestly included it because it's a little bit hilarious. And the funniest thing about it at the end is that he says, make sure that you read this will daily. Daily. Talk about the burden. So we don't want to do that to our children. But I think it's the danger of that, Hannah, is low. The danger that we will write them something that's going to feel like a burden is low. The possibility that we will write them that something that feels like an inspiration and a legacy and that brings up happy memories and gives them a sense of your values and your purpose, that is high. Yes?
I'm taking a little bit of objection because I feel that these are things that I've tried to impart through my entire life. And in thinking about what I would like my legacy to be, I don't really want to orchestrate from the grave. I hope that they've already learned a lot of these principles.
There are people who say that. There are people who choose not to write an ethical will for that reason. But I think even if you choose not to write it down, the process of thinking it through and saying, if I were to summarize what it is I've been trying to communicate all these years, that process is an instructive process.
already been done.
And it may be something that, in the end, you decide to leave something in writing after all. Yes, other comments?
Out loud. I second that.
I think that's a good one. I mean, yes, I would like to take it for granted that my daughter will always be the good person I think I've raised her to be. But I don't think there's anything wrong with sort of setting that expectation. Saying, you know, I'm done, but I think here are the things that I thought were important during my life. I expect you to continue on.
I think, and the degree to which you're stating what was important to you and the degree to which you're stating your expectations, that's of course up to you. And I gave you a sampling of different ethical wills to show you that it's different from person to person, and that you have lots and lots of opportunities to do it exactly your way, or in the end to decide not to do it, of course. Yes?
What's your comment from a Jewish perspective of just relaying what you try to do in your life instead of relaying how you want your progeny to live?
Well, I think that they're both legitimate Jewish
In
expressions.
other words, emulation rather than, not even emulation, just what you did right, what you did wrong, and rather than laying anything on and reaching out from the grave, so to speak.
Well, I think it depends what you're reaching out from the grave with. I mean, we already, I don't have a problem personally with stating an expectation or stating a hope for your children. But it all depends on the wording and on the child, of course. It's about your relationship with them, and it's very much shaped by what you do. Remember that it's not only for the children. There may be grandchildren or great-grandchildren born one day who never knew you, who can get to know you through whatever writing you may leave behind. So these are all possibilities. And I think in this room, I'm heartened but not surprised to hear that people are concerned about not guilting their children. I like it. I think that's a good consideration to have. At the same time, I don't think we should shy away from telling our children what we believe and what we hope for them. Yes?
I was just going to say, I think that as we leave those thoughts, we leave them to our children. They may be in different places at different times in their lives. And I think that having something in writing that they can go back to and refer to and read again in different ways, and either as they married or have children or grandchildren or whatever point they are in time, that they may recall the words, but having that something tangible in front of you, I think can mean a lot.
Thank you. Last couple comments on this. Yes?
Just one other perspective too. I think I had done one about 8 years ago in a program I was in, and I also think it can be very valuable for ourselves to help us as we go through different things in our lives and different points in our lives to get a clearer view of really sitting and thinking about what do we really think for ourselves and how are we going to proceed through a next phase or whatever. So it's not just for others, it can also be very helpful for ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Yes?
When you go to a funeral, very often the children of the deceased will give a eulogy, a description of what this person's life meant to them. And I think it would be very interesting if they would prepare an ethical response while the person is still living to give to this person, and for this person to tell how he views or she views everything that they have said, and to thank them for understanding what he has taught them in his lifetime.
That's beautiful. The idea of having it be a two-way conversation among the living. Thank you for that. That's a lovely thought to share, and something we can all consider. Now, just to balance Judah Ibn Tibbon, the next will was by a very modest man whom we really only know through his ethical will, and the whole will is there for you, but I'm going to just highlight in the last couple of paragraphs. He talks about speech and the purity of speech. As you speak no scandal, so listen to none. For if there were no receivers, there would be no bearers of slanderous tales. And then I love this, that he says, don't talk during the service at shore. We invented that. This is centuries ago. And then I love his ending. Put me in the ground at the right hand of my Father, and if the space be a little narrow, I'm sure he loved me well enough to make room by his side. So there's some very sweet things. Rabbi Herbert A. Friedman, who was a major figure in the world of Federation and UJA for many years, lists 4 areas: what I believe, what I have done, what I have learned, and what my dream is for you. Now, what my dream... 6, thank you. So, I'm not going to read through these now. I want to call them to your attention as examples, and there are things that you can look at, read over your Shabbos table, discuss possibly with your children. I love that idea of reading other people's ethical rules too, to discuss ultimate values, to direct your own life. Thank you for that comment. Now, I included Francine Classroom because I think it's a lovely piece, because she quotes from the Talmud, which I always like, as an example, and because she doesn't say everything was always so wonderful. She says, it sounds so corny. We both remember the hours we spent together during your day school years poring over Hebrew texts and homework assignments. I would get impatient. Can you ever forgive my impatience? And you, frustrated with the amount of study time in your demanding classes required, Grandpa had studied with me the same way when I was young. So, dare you repeat such patterns with your own children? I think you will. I think you must. So she talks about how it wasn't always so perfect, and she talks about various issues. I wanted to read one out loud because I love it for its gratitude and its humor. Would somebody volunteer to read Sam Levinson? You remember him? Oh, you met him. Craig, will you read for us? Be loud voice, please.
1976. I leave you my unpaid debts. They are my greatest assets. Everything I own, I owe. Number 1, to America, I owe a debt for the opportunity it gave me to be free and to be me. Number 2, to my parents, I owe America. They gave it to me, and I leave it to you. Take good care of it. Number 3, to the biblical tradition, I owe the belief that man does not live by bread alone, nor does he live alone at all. This is also the democratic tradition. Preserve it. Number 4, to the 6 million of my people, and to the 30 million other humans who died because of man's inhumanity to man, I owe a vow that it must never happen again. Number 5, I leave you not everything I never had, but everything I had in my lifetime. A good family, respect for learning, compassion for my fellow man, and some 4-letter words for all occasions. Words like help, give, care, feel, and love. Love, my dear grandchildren, is easier to recommend than to define. I can tell you only that, like those who came before you, you will surely know when love ain't. You will also know when mercy ain't and brotherhood ain't. The millennium will come when all the ain'ts shall become is's, and all the is's shall be for all, even for those you don't like. Finally, I leave you the years I should like to have lived, so that I might possibly see whether your generation will bring more love and peace to the world than ours did. I not only hope that you will, I pray that you will.
So there are various ways to leave your thoughts and your legacies, including by quoting from other people and whose words you have found inspirational, whether it's in an ethical will like this one, or a biblical quote, a quote that guided you in your lifetime. Now I want to get to talking about how we might begin to think about writing something ourselves, or just articulating something, whether we choose to share it or not. Reflect on your own life, number 4 on your handout, is about how you begin this process. Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi wrote a wonderful book called From Aging to Saging. And in that book, he suggests that you can divide out the life cycle by counting every 7 years as 1 month, and then dividing the years into seasons. So that ages 0 to 7 is January, 8 to 14 is February. You get it? And I have it here on the handout. So January, February, and March are winter. They are for sowing, and they begin your biological identity. The beginning of life, childhood. Then April, May, and June, number 4 on the first page. April, May, and June are spring. That take you from ages 22 to 42. This is the time of pruning, of establishing your social identity, of deciding what of what you have received is truly yours and what you will prune away. July, August, September is summer, bearing fruit, your identity as a leader. And October through December is fall, harvest, and spiritual identity. So this corresponds with what the Kabbalists call the 4 worlds. You might be familiar with the 4 worlds. The first of the 4 worlds, the level on which we mostly live, is the world of doing, asiyah. And then, considered to be sometimes described as above that, is the world of feeling. What leads you to do something? Well, I had a feeling. I had either a sensation or an emotion that caused me to act into the doing. And what's above that? Knowing. I have a knowledge, a learning, and above that is being. So these map nicely that the world of doing is the youth and the winter. The world of feeling, of spring, of 22 to 42 is all about feeling your way to your social identity. And then the summer of life maps onto knowing, the world of Bria, because it is now that you gain the bulk of your wisdom. It's only at age 40 that you start to study Kabbalah. According to the Mishnah, it's only at age 50 that you should start giving anybody advice. So, and then the final, what's considered in some cases the highest of the worlds is the world of being, the world where there's oneness and interconnectedness, the spiritual identity, and we call that harvesting. So if you think about it, really the work of elder years is the work of that harvesting. And you can't really allow yourself to harvest without certain things in place. You need the time and the space. You need the quiet to give consideration to all the kinds of deep questions we've been raising. What is it that I've transmitted already through my life? What is it I want to leave behind? How do I want to live out the next years? What are my values? What's my mission? All those questions. You also need to give yourself, I think, a few gifts. And I put it this way because sometimes it seems like these are requirements, but really I invite you to give yourself the gift of forgiveness. That's also on that first page. That in order to really begin to think about harvesting all the wisdom that you've acquired until this point, you think about forgiving yourself, forgiving others. Elders are experts in perspective. You have, after a certain number of years, the benefit of looking over experience, of seeing certain patterns, of understanding Gam ze ya'avor, this too shall pass. And with that perspective, you can reframe and you can understand some of what you've gone through in a new way. And lastly, gratitude is a great gift that you can give yourself. If you have many life blessings, but you don't really take them in, you don't acknowledge them, you don't breathe them in, you're focused on all the to-dos or on all the tsuras, and you don't give equal time, at least, to the blessings, then are they really yours? Are those blessings really yours? So this is the time in Zalman's imagination of harvest. In the years of winter, and especially whatever age you are, if you're thinking about an ethical will, it's a time of harvest. You're harvesting what wisdom, what perspective you've had to this point. And so I really invite you to think about spending some time on forgiveness, perspective, and gratitude. Now, Zalman invented an exercise that if you read the title of the exercise, you get the whole exercise, and I just love the title. The title is A Testimonial Dinner for Severe Teachers. So you imagine, all the people who done you wrong coming to a dinner, and you have to speak on their behalf. Thank you for doing that. I forgive you. Although you meant it from my heart, look how it played out. Look what opportunities came out of it. Look what lessons came out of it. And I am grateful for the life that I had. So I think that's a great way to go into, to prepare for thinking about how we are going to get at these questions. Now, on your tables, you may notice there are some index cards, and I want to do a couple of exercises with you. I'm going to ask you to pass around one color first. Let's all pass around the white ones first. And while you're doing that, think about someone you admire. Somebody you very much admire, someone, and think about some specific thing they did that you admire the way they lived their life, some specific story of theirs, something they did, something they said. Who's got one? Who's got someone they admire who did or said something? Okay, Arlene, I'll repeat, but in as loud a voice as you can, just share with us briefly what did you think of and who? She started with grandfather.
Because he went through terrible times, and his family was in a certain way that we thought of, and that very hard, and give him whatever he could.
So she admired him because although he went through terrible, terrible times, he always kept his family at the center of things, and he worked extremely hard to give them whatever he could. Who's got another one? Who's got a guess?
Arthur Joseph.
Arthur Joseph. You admire him?
He was our mentor and our leader. Anyone who knew him, what he was a person who just loved Judaism, loved the community, did everything he could, put his whole heart and soul into everything. He lived in a small, modest home, and he gave almost all his money away to charity. Not only what he did for UJA and for all the other charities you guys know about, but on Sunday mornings, there was a line of people ringing his doorbell from every shtetl of the day, asking for a few dollars. Everybody came in, and he loved it. I'll tell one story.
Yes, please.
In our synagogue, every year, he gave away apples for Simchas Torah. And one year, the women's chairman, who was running the event, couldn't reach him. She came up, he was sitting in front of me in synagogue, and she said, "Arthur, I couldn't reach you, so I ordered all the apples and told them to charge it to your account." And his response was, "Thank you for doing that."
So, let's listen to that. There was a lot in there. There was a lot in there. There was love. The love of the Jewish people, love of people in general. There was generosity. There was modesty. There was gratitude. There was so much in there, right? So think of either Arlene's grandfather or of Arthur Joseph, or think of someone else and consolidate for yourself. Think about, can you name the quality that most stands out to you about that person? Just a quality. Obviously everybody is multifaceted, but a quality that springs up as being admirable and important for you. And then on page 2, I want to ask you to do number 2. Begin with that noun, that quality. Love of the Jewish people, or generosity, or working hard, or whatever the quality is, and then insert a verb other than to be, and then write anything you want about that quality. It doesn't have to be related to Arlene's grandfather or Arthur Joseph or the person you have in mind. It's under role model exercise number 2. You see it? And then, so you're going to be on page 2. It says role model exercise. There's a 1 and a 2. I'm on 2. So you're going to begin with that quality. Then you're going to put in a verb. Any verb except to be. And then complete the sentence, not necessarily about Arthur, Joseph, or the grandfather, or the person you have in mind, but just about that quality. And end the sentence with some statement of time. Now, this instant, in years past, sometime, someday, today, whatever you want to say. So, as an example, working hard gives me energy, always. That's something you could say. Or you could say, love of the Jewish people undergirds apples on Simchas Torah. Based on that particular story, could be said. So just write one sentence on your white postcards, and when you have them, pass them up to me. Everybody get the assignment? Just one sentence.
I don't really get it. I don't really get it.
All right, so I'll say it one more time. Did you think of somebody before the end? What's a quality of theirs that you love?
Loving generosity.
Loving generosity. So start the sentence with that, add a verb, write anything you want, and end with some time period. Anything you want. Think poetically, think metaphorically, use a color, use a sound. Doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be literal. We're branching out into creative writing. Consider that we're gonna make of this a poem. So just write any sentence, and then when you're done, pass it up.
I'll come around and collect.
One sentence for everybody. If you can. If you pass, that's we can live with that. But if you can't, just push yourself and write a sentence about that quality. This is from this sort of exercise. He didn't do this exercise, but this sort of exercise is from a lovely book called Wishes, Lies, and Dreams. It's on your resource list in your handout. It's about how you can write when you feel you're not a writer. So in case we have among us people say, I'd love to write an ethical will, but I'm not a writer. I'm going to show you that you are a writer. Now I have another exercise, but I'm going to give people one more minute with this one.
We can't be doing it.
Okay, anybody else?
So here's the next exercise, because I see a lot of people are done. I'm going to ask you to take, this time it doesn't matter about the colors, just take any color index card, because you're going to need 4 of them. 4 per person. They could be mix and match of colors, they could be all one color, it doesn't matter. Oh, I should have mentioned, please write it in handwriting, I'll be able to read it. But okay.
You can use your white pads if you don't have
So friends, for this next one, you don't have to have handwriting that I can read. For this last one, I hope you did, I should have mentioned it. I'll do my best. But for the next one, when you have your 4 index cards, you do not need to have anybody else read it. Ready? Raise your hand if you've got 4. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to do literally 1 minute on each of these, and it's a brainstorming exercise. So the goal is just don't let your pen stop writing if you can help it. You're going to write as much as you can for 1 minute, whatever comes to mind, and if you're done, then continue until I say stop. We're going to do 1 whole minute of exercising on 4 different topics. You ready? The first one is what you are good at. What are your talents? What are your gifts? What are you good at? A whole minute. Go. Just keep writing.
This is my first answer, so it shows how humble I am.
Okay, 15 seconds, keep going. Okay, my friends. So get your next index card, and we're going for the next one. The next one is what you enjoy. What do you like to do? If you have a lazy afternoon, what gives you pleasure? What do you enjoy? People, places, things, food. What do you enjoy?
Help yourself.
Keep going. You must enjoy something else. There's gotta be something else you like. Okay. Put away that index card. We've got 2 to go. Next one is, what is important to you? What do you find meaningful? What gives you a sense of purpose? What is important to you, primarily? What's important to you? See if you can write for a whole minute. They don't all have to be equally important to you, but what is important to you? Five more seconds on that one. Okay, now your last card, friends. You're going to write on what the world needs. What do you think the world needs? What the world needs. Now, yes, that should be on everybody's list, but what else? What does the world need? Politically, social, we want Mashiach now, we want, yeah, whatever you like, put it down. That they don't, it doesn't have to be equally needed again, just what does the world need?
Isn't there a song, what the world needs now is love? Something.
Okay, just a few more seconds. Keep going. The world must need something else. Okay, friends. So let's take a step back. I've been rushing you through a few exercises. So did anybody notice that just by thinking of somebody who was a role model, who you cared about, who exhibited good qualities, you felt a little inspired? Anybody notice that? So that's part of what we're talking about today, is looking at the legacy that others have left us, and then considering your own legacy too, in that regard. Now, I ran you through these 4 categories. That's not the exercise. Here's the exercise. You ready? Can you notice, especially among the first 3, but maybe through all 4, something that is on all lists? Is there a commonality that's on everything? Do you notice? I see some nods. So what's common to all 4 cards? In a way, that could define your purpose. It's what you're good at, it's what you care about, it's what the world needs. Who wants to share? What did you notice as a commonality?
Gratitude.
Gratitude. Very nice. Yes?
People, loved ones, that type.
Reaching out, connections, human relationships, family. What else?
Being helpful.
Being helpful. Being grateful was one. Yes?
Grateful for the world.
Being grateful for the world, not limiting it, but being grateful widely. So it's something to think about. Take a look, keep looking at those 4 cards, because in there's a lot of information about, at least in this snapshot of this day, what you were thinking about. Now, I'm going to say that, going back to the comment about it's not all about the future and progeny, it's about how we live right now. We have to recognize our legacy as it stands. This is, we referred to the Haggadah before. It's also in the Shema. When you stay in your house and when you go out, when you lie down and when you rise up, what's on your heart? What do you say and do frequently? What are you known for? You can probably think of a relative who's known by a certain expression. My husband's Aunt Martha used to say every morning when she got up, "Aha, I am up." And sometimes when we're really tired, we say that. And we do it with the gymnastic pose. "I am up." My father used to say when he greeted people or when he left them, he would say, "Enjoy life." They actually put it on his tombstone. Enjoy life. So what's your legacy? It's a legacy of words, it's a legacy of helpfulness, it's a legacy of gratitude, it's a legacy of relationships and webs of connection. That's part of it. But how are you articulating it? And if you should notice through this conversation and through further reflection that there is a gap between what you wish your legacy were and what you think you may be known for, then that's good information. And we can respond to it in 2 ways. Number 1, we can give ourselves permission to be human. We don't always live up to our highest ideals. We're not always at our best. That's life. But then also we can do what we can to bridge the gap and to consciously set about living your legacy right now. You have that choice to make. The past does not determine the future. You crafted your legacy to this point, and you can refine it. And it is yours. It's not anybody else's. Even if we all say the word gratitude, or we all say the word love, or we all say the word family, how that manifests is very different. You may know the great Hasidic story of Rabbi Zusia. Zusia was known to be extremely modest. He was a great teacher. And on his deathbed, his students were gathered, and he saw that he was afraid. Some say he was shaking, some say he was weeping. And his students were astounded. If the great Rabbi Zusia is afraid to die, how should we feel? And they said, "Zusia, what is it? Are you afraid that you won't live up to the faith of Abraham, and that when you get to heaven, God will say to you, 'Why were you not Abraham?'" And he said, "No, that's not my fear." "Are you afraid that you'll be challenged? 'Why were you not a leader like Moses?' No, that's not my fear. I'm afraid I will be asked, why was I not Zusia? Zusia. Why was he not himself?" And that's really the question that we really, I think, fear the most, is we want to be ourselves.
Not to be ourselves.
Yes. Why was he not himself? Why was he not his best self? And that's really what we're aiming for and what we're talking about. That's perfect timing, because I'm about to read you, and I wish I had, I'm doing this with, I'm leaving some people out because I couldn't read some handwriting and because the structure was a little different, but all of these cards were just beautiful in remembering different individuals and the gifts that they had. Kindness is appreciated always. Humility in silence enriches future generations. Love of family motivates life always. Doing for the continuation of the Jewish people and faith offers support forever. Smiling face and determination to learn for as long as possible. Common sense translates to doing the right thing whenever possible. Love, giving, helpfulness are always appreciated. Kindness spreads every day. Working hard is a model to future generations. Entertaining people makes them happy whenever they experience it. A positive attitude will lift your life and give you more meaningful days. Bubby made lemonade out of lemons in her past and always. There is much joy in being in the presence of kindness, intelligence, introspection, and compassion, and I am grateful for them wherever I find them. Concern for others enriches one's life always. Remembering the qualities of earlier generations inspires me to do good for others. Yeah. The wisdom of this room, just some of the wisdom of this room. Now, on page 2, at the very end, where did I put it? You know it by heart, you don't need it. I wanted to end with the words of Adonai, because you'll see on page, on page 9, I have for you sentence stems, things you can begin to write if you choose to, or just to think about. These were formative events of my life. My definition of true success is, what gives me hope is, I would grieve if I failed to transmit that. I ask you to help and care for. Different sentence stems that you could start and keep writing with as you go home. But I wanted to end today with Adon Olam, because the words are familiar and the sentiment is so important. It ends us where we began, that there is a connection between body and spirit. There's a connection between the practical and the ultimate. There's a connection between this world and the next. And we hope to walk through it all bravely, clear-eyed, and intentionally. So I'm going to introduce a melody that you may know for Ani L'Dodi, V'Dodi Li. I am for my beloved, and my beloved is for me. And when we sing it to God as beloved, and we sing it to a spouse as beloved, and we sing it to friends and family as beloved. And we'll sing it in a melody first, and then to the words of the Adon Olam. Into God's hand I commend my soul, when asleep and when awake, with my spirit and my body too. Adonai is with me, I shall not fear. Be'eti life, in your giving, in your legacy, and all the way into the next world by the people who love you and by the God into whose hand your soul is given. Amen. Thank you, everybody.
I think that Lori must have known somewhere inside that we were such a perfect fit, really. Because Rabbi Deborah gave such an eloquent presentation today. And she really did. And I am a living example of everything that you shouldn't do. You are going to hear my story, and it is a sad story. I don't know if any of you knew my parents, Chuck and Margie Rothschild. Okay. I'm the person that got the phone call that nobody ever wants to get. It was April 24th, 1994. And I had a 12-year-old son who was about to be bar mitzvah. I had my own very successful software company, technology company in the hedge fund industry. And my father was working with me, having retired, and was helping me learn how to become an executive. And I got a phone call from the Teaneck police. My parents were on their way back from their country home in the Berkshires, and they had been in a car accident. My mom had been instantly killed, and my father was in the process of being airlifted to Hartford Hospital, and they didn't expect him to make it, so they told me not to even bother to go. I did go, and Dad did make it, but he suffered traumatic brain injury in the accident. And he lived for the next 14 years, and I was his primary care coordinator. So I was not only juggling my son and my business, but also my father. And it was quite a situation for me. I eventually sold my company. I was approached by a well-known firm, and they wanted to buy the company. And I let them because my father was kind of deteriorating. I expanded my house in New Jersey and added a handicap accessible addition and brought my father and his staff of aides to my house in 2005. And Dad passed away peacefully at home in April of 2008. And that is when my nightmare began. My father was very faithful, very dutiful, very organized. And every 5 to 7 years, he would send us a data locator. This is the original data locator. It was typed on a Smith Corona. And every few years, he would update it by hand. And it listed everything in it. The last time I had received this was in 1989. This one is 1987, and then he added on to it. So I'd gotten this additional one in 1989. But after the accident in 1994, which was within that 5 to 7 year period, I didn't get any updates, and Dad couldn't really tell us what he had because he couldn't really remember. So for 14 years after the accident, plus the 5 years prior to the accident, you can imagine what this was worth. The only thing that was still valid on it was his plot in Indiana. Between 1987 and 1994, my parents had changed banks, brokerage firms, accountants, attorneys, and had gotten a home safe and gotten rid of their safe deposit box. So when my dad passed away, I went on a scavenger hunt. And it was a 4.5-year scavenger hunt. Because I had to pull together all of the important information, the practical information. And it wasn't because he just forgot about it. It was because he couldn't do it. And there's a lesson there for everybody to hear. Because in those days, there weren't as many different things. They didn't have passwords. They didn't have online accounts. They didn't have all kinds of additional things. I ended up having to inventory his home in Teaneck and his home in the Berkshires. I ended up having to try to find all of the different professional firms that he used. And not only the firms, but the contacts that he had in those firms and the people's phone numbers. And I had to even find out who the different vendors were and suppliers were for his house. If it needed a paint job or if something went wrong, I wanted to use the company that had originally worked on it to begin with. So I really spent 4.5 years going through everything and knew deep down that I had not gotten it all. Sure enough, the 5th year after his death, I get a letter addressed to Dad from John Hancock. Dear Mr. Rothschild, you haven't contacted us in 5 years. Duh. If you don't get in touch with us, we're going to have to take the proceeds of your insurance policy and give them to the government. Now that's called escheating. What's the first thing I think? What insurance policy? I didn't know there was another insurance policy. So I called John Hancock. I had to prove who I was. I had to prove who he was. I had to prove that he had died. And I had to prove that I was a rightful heir. And when I did all that, I found out that Dad had initiated a life insurance policy in 1938. And nobody knew. It wasn't on the data locator. So, my message to everyone is that you need to be proactive. You need to plan. I jumped on the internet and I couldn't find anything that could help me pull everything together. So I actually created software to pull it all together. And that was what I was doing for a number of years. I got a phone call, a very strange phone call from a man named Len. And he said, is this, I don't know how to ask this question. Did you know Marjorie and Chuck Rothschild? And I said, yes. And I could tell this was going to be another John Hancock moment. And he said, well, are you a relative? And I said, yes, they were my parents. And he explained who he was. And as it turned out, my parents had made a donation to the Jewish Federation, to a fund, and it was a donor fund.
Donor advised fund.
Donor advised fund. And they had been looking for someone who could continue that fund, but nobody knew about it. We didn't know about it. So that's how I met Lori and Lynn a few years ago.
Yeah.
What I ended up doing is getting my son, who's 34, involved in the process. So when we determine who should get what money, what charities should get money, my son is involved in that decision making. I have an exercise for all of you that I would like to have you bear with me. If your parents are alive, raise your hands and keep your hands raised. If you can name, keep your hands raised. If you can name the medications they take and the allergies they have. Look around. Better than usual, okay? Let's try it again. Put your hand down. How many of you have adult children? Raise your hands. Keep them up. If your adult children can name the medications and allergies that you have. Everybody look in the room. Okay. What we're talking about is intergenerational communication. We talked about the communication in one direction that Rabbi Deborah beautifully described. But there are additional types of communication that need to be had. And they're a little bit more practical at the same time. How many of you have actually done a home inventory of everything in your house? Look around. How many of you have pulled together all of your important information? All of it. The deeds, the titles, the will, everything. Look around. Okay. These are very, very important things that everybody needs to have. The reason is that things happen. And when you're faced with a crisis, be it a natural one like Katrina or Sandy or an upcoming nor'easter that could affect us, or if you're faced with a medical emergency, as we all will be, that is not the time to start to scramble to try to get all of the information together. That is the time to have all of your information at your fingertips so that you can make informed decisions and so that you can pass your legacy on, all of your information, seamlessly, painlessly, from one generation to another. These are very, very important things for you to be thinking about. I have another question for all of you. How many of you have adult children over the age of 18 unmarried? Could be grandchildren too. Absolutely. Unmarried over the age of 18. How many keep your hands up. How many parents or grandparents have those kids notarized healthcare directives? I'll explain. Notarized healthcare directive. A notarized healthcare directive is, you've all heard of HIPAA. HIPAA is the act that legally emancipates a minor or someone who's turned 18 medically. So if you have an 18-year-old child or grandchild who lives at home, they're in their last year of high school, they are paid, everything is paid for by you, they're on your medical insurance, they walk out the door, they go down the block, they trip, they fall, they become unconscious. You legally have zero right to even know about it, let alone to make decisions for them if they can't make decisions themselves.
But did you go call it authorized what?
It's a health care directive. It is probably one of the most important and overlooked pieces of paper in the country. It is a national, federal law. And since the divorce rate is so high, and of the people that are still married, the happiness factor is not 100%, doctors are getting more and more concerned about violating HIPAA. So I have actually spoken at places, and people have come up to me either at the time or later. They've dropped me an email and said, "You're right. I took my 18-year-old or my 21-year-old to the doctor, and I had an open house to go to, and when I called in to ask how my child was, they wouldn't tell me a thing. And I took my kid right out from the doctor's office straight to the attorney. And we got it signed, sealed, and delivered." You can't sign the health care directive. Your child has to sign it. And you have to get 2 copies, one for your child and one for you. So make 2 copies. It should not cost you more. If you have an attorney, it shouldn't cost you anything. The attorney should pretty much be doing it as part of your estate planning. If you don't have an attorney, I know attorneys who will do it for $100 or less. It is the most overlooked thing. And every time I speak, this is what I speak about. I have also written articles about it. I have an article that I made copies of for everyone. I wrote an article for Forbes. And it's called, "Are You Gambling with Your Family's Medical Care Decisions?" Because most people think about getting the health care proxy for the seniors. But they don't think about getting it for the 18-year-old.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I speak on this all the time. I've been doing it for years. I am a healthcare attorney. Several of us tried to go into the driver's ed classes in the public school when we felt, okay, they weren't quite 18, most of them would be 16 and 17, but begin to start addressing it with them. And now this is a long time ago, and maybe things have changed. But the reaction we got was, we don't want to scare the kids any more than we do in driver's ed, and we would turn down. So maybe it's time to think about it again.
Possibly, but I think it's not a driver's ed kind of thing. I think it's a parental thing.
It was just, we felt that it was the right audience to at
Yeah.
least begin to, because they show them pictures of kids in crashes and unconscious kids, and it's not only the adults that perhaps have medical issues. We thought it was the right venue to begin to say you're not necessarily going to live forever.
Right. It's true.
And we had no success.
Yes.
This also is old. I was a visiting nurse for many years and a hospice nurse, and we spent a lot of time explaining living wills, healthcare proxies to our patients, and encouraging them to sign them, fill them out and sign them. And never did we ever need a lawyer or a notary.
You don't need a lawyer or a notary for that. However, when you're dealing with minors or young adults, you're dealing with different states, you're dealing with the kids traveling interstate, and you may want, I always recommend that if you're going to have a legal document, the legal document be reviewed by an attorney. Sure, you can go online and you can pull them down. However, you want to make sure that the way that it's worded and the way that it's set up is appropriate for your child, for your situation. And it's really the attorney that would know about that. All of you know Marty Schenkman. Anybody knows Marty? Go talk to Marty. Marty's great too. He will tell you what you might need to do or what you might need to know. Any other comments about this? This is probably one of the most important things that I can tell you. I try to educate people about the things that they don't know that are important. Yes?
Do you have software that we could buy? It's not a joke.
You can
I
see her
do.
afterwards.
But you can see me afterwards, but that is not something that I'm going to talk about during this talk. Okay, but thank you, yes. The other thing that is so important about being proactive and pulling everything together is what falls through the cracks. You know that two things fell through the cracks with me. The John Hancock Agreement and the Donor Advisor Fund. There is a rabbi and his wife in Connecticut. Tell me if you've heard this, because this is a true story. They bought a desk off of Craigslist about 2 years ago. And when they bought it, they couldn't get it up the stairs. It was a desk from Staples. The woman had put it together herself. She didn't need it anymore, so she sold it. And they went, they got it, they brought it home, they couldn't get it up the stairs. So they manually dismantled it. And in the process of manually dismantling it, the wife, in pulling out one of the file drawers, noticed something shiny, a bag or something in the back. And when she pulled it out, guess how much money was in the bag? $98,000. And they, of course, called the person who had sold them the desk. And you know what the comment was? Oh my God, I forgot.
Oh my God.
I forgot. Turned out that her mother didn't trust banks, put the money in a bag, hid the bag, and when she felt that it was time, she gave the inheritance to her daughter, who out of respect decided to follow suit. And she hid the money in the desk and then totally forgot about it. How many of you have been on missingmoney.com?
$98,000 in the bag.
Okay. Did you find anything? All right. Did you look for you, for your parents, for your grandparents, for everybody? Don't stop looking. Missing money. There is between 40 and 400 billion, with a B, $billion worth of money that is sitting in unclaimed property in this country. And it is free to get back. There's no statute of limitation on the money. You can actually go to missingmoney.com, you can put your name in, and you can put your state in. You don't have to put your social security number in. It will list for you all of the addresses where money has been escheated or confiscated, and it's not allowed to be done, nothing's allowed to be done with it by the state. They are obligated to try to find the rightful owners of the money. And in New Jersey, you not only get the money, you get the interest. So, confiscated by the state. So it's state by state. So if you previously lived in another state, you'd have to deal with that state's missing money. Missing money will cover most of the states, but the money is housed at the state level where it was escheated. I have gotten, I can't tell you how many emails from people thanking me for telling them about missing money. $8,000, $700. My son, he was 30 at the time. I did my missing money search, and you keep doing it because it generally cycles every 5 years. However, next year there'll be another cycle. Each year it compounds. And my son had not cashed some dividend checks because he had left Ithaca and moved to Boston. He got $174 back. For a 30-year-old, that was such a nice treat. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's something very practical that started to happen
locally here with the banks, with this Ashita. You know, CDs that you have can be automatically renewed. If they're automatically renewed for more than 3 times, and you do not show up at the bank, that can be Ashitas and turned over to the state of New Jersey. I've started to get letters from banks to that effect, and I had to handle it. So you really, if you've got CDs that you're just letting automatically renew, at some point you've got to show up at the bank and say, I'm still alive, okay?
There's also a site, unclaimed property.
That unclaimed property takes you to missing money.
Oh, is that right? Because
See, if
I
you-
have collected.
Okay, if you started unclaimed property, it will take you to missing money. So what's my message here? My message here is twofold. Number one, be proactive and pull your things together that are important. Rabbi Deborah was talking about all of the different things and how they have meaning. These earrings were my mother's, and I wear them when I go to events like this because they remind me of my mother. This was her 50th wedding anniversary ring. She only got to wear it for 4 months to the day. So the legacy kinds of things are so important for you to document and put down and include all the stories that are behind it. But the second thing that is equally important, and what Rabbi Deborah reinforced, is intergenerational communication. You want your children to understand what you feel is important, just as they need to understand what medications you're on and what allergies you have. If any of you were in a car accident and your kids got called, would your kids be able to tell the hospital what meds you're on and what you're allergic to? Yes.
I started keeping a medical history a couple of years ago. It's been invaluable.
Yes.
Things you wouldn't remember.
That's right. It's really important. Yes?
So I have kids that are about 30, 2 kids, and if we wanted to be proactive, because you touched on so many excellent points, what would you recommend we do? Have a family meeting at our attorney's office and
There are a number of things.
what would you recommend to be proactive as a family, intergenerationally, to do?
Your kids are 30? It's a
28 and
perfect
30,
time.
yeah.
Well, number one, and this is something for all of you, it's just one additional suggestion. If you don't have home inventories, have your grandchildren or your children participate. It's a great pairing of a grandparent and a grandchild. Think about grandchildren. They all have their own cell phones. They all have pictures, camera in the cell phone. They could actually go around your house and take pictures of things that were important to you. And you know what you could do? You could tell them the stories about those very items and why you got them and where you got them and how important they are to you. And you now have an inventory so that you can decide who you would want to get those things. That's something that you can start doing with your kids immediately, because you're only going to grow additional information and assets as you get older and they get older. Yes?
Some time ago, a couple months, I got my children. I said, listen, I love you very much, but I'm not going to rest forever. These are my contents. What do you love here? You tell me, you love this, this is yours. You love this, this. And they know now, they accept the fact that one day I'm going to go. And they know that this part is there, no matter what is developed.
But do they know it because you've just discussed it, or do they know it because it's documented?
No, because I told them I'm documenting it now.
Okay, because if it's not documented, that's where the problems occur that Rabbi Deborah was talking about. I know we have to wrap it up. I have information. I have 2 handouts that you can have. I gave your table a checklist of different kinds of pieces of information to pull together. I'm here for questions if anyone has them.
Robin needs to close.
And Robin is going to close. Hold on. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me if I don't use the microphone?
Okay, I need to use the microphone. So, first of all, thank you very much again to our two speakers, Rabbi Orenstein and Carol Kaufman. If we can acknowledge and thank you again. You gave us so much to think about today, and we really appreciate you joining us. I want to take just a couple of minutes before I let everybody go. On the way in today, one of the guests asked me, why is Federation doing this? Why have we been doing these programs? And this was my answer. I had a couple of answers. The first is that most of the people in this room, certainly many of the people in this room, are part of a unique group of donors to our community. And I think we mentioned this throughout, but for those of you who received postcards specifically about these programs, you may or may not realize it, but you are part of a unique group called our Circle of Partners. And that group is people who have been giving consistently for 25 years or more to this federation. And that says to us that you care about Federation, that you care about community. And this is our way of saying thank you for your loyalty and your commitment. That's part of it. The other part is, we said at the beginning, this is a pilot program, and it's been very gratifying for us to put faces on our donors and to have you come in and see what Federation is about. And it's not just an organization that you write a check to, but there are real people here, and there are real issues that we think about, and we want to know more about you, and we would like you to know more about us. And it's been really, really gratifying for us to understand and to feel how much there is a need for this kind of programming, how much the feedback we've gotten has been really wonderful, and we want to say thank you and acknowledge it. And hopefully we'll be able to continue, and hopefully if you are interested in making sure this kind of programming continues, then we invite you to please give us your feedback and maybe be part of a group that helps continue this kind of activity. I mentioned for the last two sessions, we do have a corporate sponsor that has enabled us to have a nice lunch. That is Colonial Consulting, who is the investment advisor that the Endowment Foundation utilizes. And I want to remind us about Super Sunday. Paula mentioned it in her opening remarks. We'd love to have everybody participate and to help get the word out about how wonderful Federation is. It's going to be a grand day. Deborah Carger and Jody Heimler, our Director of Financial Resource Development. These two smiling faces, please join the day and be with us on Sunday. You've heard that the doing good feels good. And hopefully you've experienced that, and being part of Super Sunday will be an opportunity to feel good while doing good. I have a couple of other thoughts. It must be the day for it. I want everybody that is wearing a piece of jewelry or a piece of clothing or whatever that has come from one of your parents or grandparents or what have you, because I'm also wearing my grandmother's necklace. So it's already 3 of us that have this. How many of us, I'm curious, how many of us are wearing jewelry that belong to, okay, so we see the power of legacy, not only of, it's not just sitting in our drawers, but it's a sense of hearkening back and understanding where we come from and what personal connections we have. In terms of the ethical wills also, so I'm really going to close in a minute. Arlene, you had mentioned about living your life in a way that you hope that your children internalize. So when I wear my grandmother's necklace, I knew this grandmother and I knew what she stood for, what she was about. I didn't know my other grandparents. And boy, would I love to have a piece of paper that said, this is who they were and this is what they valued, and to tell me a little bit more. And frankly, even from them, because it would have been handwritten. Maybe the ethical wills we'd be writing are going to be typed up on a computer. But to be able to feel and touch somebody's handwriting and to understand. So it's not only, I think about it, and I haven't written my ethical will, but it's not only for the people that know us, but also for the people that don't know us. And for our grandchildren and for our great-grandchildren to get a glimpse in.
And that's part of what the Endowment Foundation is doing also through the Book of Life program, which you've heard me talk about. So some of the entries in this book, and many of the people in this room have entries in the book, really speak to, not just for their children, but for the grandchildren, for the community. What is the legacy that you want to communicate with people that you will never meet, that will understand why community matters to you, and why you've invested, and why you're giving back. So I invite you again, please take a Book of Life brochure. The page is to say what you want, what your values are. Some people talk about their grandparents, their journey to America, whatever it is, but it is a way of helping community understand who are the people that came before, that planted the seeds for what will come after. So Lori is holding up a sign. First of all and foremost, put down the sign. Lori Siegel has really put this entire program together. And I thank her deeply for doing all of this work, and I'm sure you all appreciate that she did it as well. My colleagues Len Fisher and Deborah Carger and Michal also were invaluable, and I thank them very much for the teamwork. That is what Federation is about. Your evaluation forms, as always, we do read them. It does matter to us. If there are things of particular interest that you'd like us to cover, please put it down. And your name badges, I think that is everything. Again, thank you to our speaker. And thank you all for being here, and it's been a pleasure meeting you, and we hope to see you many more times.